Okay, our next task is going to be to work on the filtering section on the right hand side. And what we want to do is be able to select either all activities, the activities the user's going to, or the activities that the user's hosting, and then also we'll give them the option to select the date of the activity. And the way that we'll approach this is that we'll return all activities after the date that they've clicked. Well, not all of them, obviously, because we're still going to be paginating our results, but it's going to give us access to all of the activities after whichever date they select here. Now, we're going to retain the date, regardless of what they click up here, but we're only going to give them the option to select one of these at any one time. That's the theory, and let's see what we need to do to set this up. So let's just clean things up at the top, because we're going to be working with our API to start with. And what we want to do is take in additional parameters for our activity list. Now, we'll keep the paging params separately, just in case we want to use those parameters for another list. And what we'll do in the activities feature folder, we'll create a new class and we'll call this activity params. And of course, we can just inherit from the paging params in order to get the paging parameters also inside this particular class. And what we're going to have is a property that's a Boolean for is going. We'll add another Boolean for is host, and we'll add a date time, and we'll say using a system, and we'll say start date, and we'll give this an initial value of date time and UTC now. And then we can head over to our activity list handler, and instead of taking in the paging params, we'll take in the activity params. And then we can make use of these to filter our request. So what we'll do, before we order our activities, we can start off by setting the start date of what we want to return. So we're only going to be returning events that take place in the future by default. We're not going to show past events on our activity list. So what we'll do is we'll add a where clause, and we'll say d goes to d.date, that is greater than or equal to the request.params.startDate. And the rest of this query, at this point, we can keep the same. Our queryable is going to be a query expression tree. Nothing's taking place in a database in this method. And what we can do is modify that query depending on the request parameters. So what we'll do, we'll say if request.params.isGoing and the request params is not the host, so we'll say exclamation mark request.params is host. Then we'll say the query equals query dot where, and we can say x goes to x.attendees dot any, and we'll say a goes to a dot username, that's equal to the user accessor, and we'll say get username for the currently logged in user, because these filters are only going to be applicable to the currently logged in user. So we're just going to show events that they're going to or they are hosting, and we're not going to use this to filter for other users. This is purely personal to the user that's currently logged in. So we'll get their username to filter that one, and then we'll add another if statement, and we'll say if request.params.isHost and request.params.isGoing, and we'll add the not operator there. So this is the parameters. It's not whether or not the user is going, it's what we've got contained in our request parameters. And in this case, we just want to return the activities where the user is hosting that activity. So we'll say query equals query where, and we'll say x goes to x dot host username, because remember at this point, because of projection, we're working with an activity DTO, which means we have access to the host username inside here. And what we can do is check that this is equal to the user accessor and the get username. And then all we need to do is go to our activities controller, and we can change our paging params to activity params. And it is as simple as that. So what we can do now is we can go across to Postman and test this new functionality. So what we've got is a bunch of requests to test the filtering, and if we take a look at the first one, this is to get the activities that Bob is attending. So the token we're sending up is for Bob, and if we take a look at the parameters, we've got the isGoing equals true. And if we click on send, then what we get is a list of activities that Bob should be on the attendance list for. And if we take a look at the headers, then we can see the total items in my case is 5. This is how many activities Bob is on the attendance list for. If we take a look at the activities that Bob is hosting, we can see the query param is isHost equals true. And if we click send on this one, then we can see our list of activities, and Bob should be the host for all of these. And this does look to be the case. And if we take a look at the headers, then we can see the total items is 3 in my case. And then we've got the date filters. We've got the activities starting in 2 months' time. And we've just got a pre-request script here to add 2 months onto the activity date variable, which we then use in our query string. So it's going to be start date in 2 months from now. And if we click send on this one, then we should just see activities in the future that's greater than 2 months away from now. And if we take a look at the headers, then we can see that we get 6 items back for this request. If we take a look at get activities starting in 2 months' time that Bob is going to, we're passing multiple parameters up for this one. And if we look at the pre-request script, in fact this says 4 months from now. So let's change it to 2 and click send. And if we take a look at the headers, then we can see we get total items of 3. And if we change it to 4 months and click send, then the total items goes down to 2. And then we've got a request to get activities in the past, and if we take a look at the pre-request script, we're adding -3 months. And if we click send, then we should get all of the past activities included as well. And if we take a look at the headers, then we can see that total items is 8, because this is also filtering the isGoing flag as well. So our filtering appears to be working, and what we can do next is implement this on the client.